Welcome everyone, this is Michael from the Marks Group Live. Excited to be here today teaching admin class, module and field customization part 2 to you live and in person. Today we're going to cover the following. We're going to look at a survey of available field types. There are 23 different types of fields and we're going to look at all of them. We're going to understand the layout, the limitations of custom fields. We're going to add custom fields and out-of-the-box fields to a layout. We're going to modify field properties, and we're going to take a short look at subforms. This is a two-part class. In today's session, I'll be expanding on and extending the work that we conducted, or maybe another trainer conducted in the first lesson, Class 201, Module and Field Customization Part 1. We're going to spend about 45 minutes going over the classwork, maybe 60 minutes, and then I'll open the last 45 or 60 minutes for a chat discussion where I can answer any of your questions provided by you in the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. I expect you'll see that chat window somewhere about there. If you're viewing this on a mobile device, there should be a chat window available there as well, where I ask you to please place all of your questions during our class today. Whether you're on mobile or desktop, that chat window will close a few minutes after the class is over, but I do encourage you to continue asking questions for clarity on our main web page, where you'll see a chat option on every page. Just mention that you're asking a question regarding a class topic, and one of our trainers will be able to help you out. If you're having resolution or speed issues, down at the bottom right corner of your Vimeo window, or video window, I should say, you'll see two buttons. There are the four arrows that point in all directions. That will make your video full screen. And then the gear or the cog icon can be used to adjust the size of your video window. We recommend leaving that or setting it to auto, as this will allow you to make, that'll give your computer the ability to adjust the video screen for video size for optimal viewing. But if you find that your internet is a bit slow or laggy, you may want to adjust that downward. Feel free to download and follow along with our class documentation. This is not a manual, but it is a nice way to follow along, as well as being a reference after the class. You should be able to scroll down the screen just a bit and see the download link. And I think that brings us to the start of our work. Let's see, let's go here and there. All right. Okay. We're just getting our screens set up here. Right. Quick note, if your screen does not look exactly like mine does, do not panic. Different versions of Zoho look slightly different, and your system administrator may have set up your screens a little differently from ours. The functionality that we're discussing today is pretty common to different versions of Zoho. I will address limitations of different versions of Zoho later on in today's class. If you're not sure whether your version of Zoho will do what you need it to do, send me a chat message or send us an email, and the email is support@marksgrouplive.com or michaelf@marksgroup.net. Send us an email or send us a chat message, and we'll make sure that you have the right Zoho version that you need to get done what you want to accomplish. Also note that this is an administrator class. If you don't have administrator privileges on your system, you'll have a tough time replicating the work that we're doing. At the same time, if you're a system user, you're welcome to check out the class and see what Zoho is capable of doing, because it really is quite remarkable and quite powerful. So I'm going to start with a quick recap of what we covered in the 201 class, part 1 of module and field customization. Let me get rid of that. Actually, let's put that there. So we looked at where to find module and field customization options. That was up in the setup area here, and modules and fields. Now, different versions of Zoho will have either a pair of crossed tools like this. We have Zoho 1 here. Different versions of Zoho may have a cog or a gear up in that area. This is where, let's see, so setup is where you find the modules and fields customization. It's off on the top section of the far right of row 1. In part 1 of this lesson, we went over how to create a new module by clicking on the Create New Module, the plus sign with the New Module button there. We clicked on that and we walked through the process of creating a new module. We also looked at tab groups. That's up here. It's the second sub-tab over here in the modules and fields customization area. So we looked at tab groups. They're a way to limit groups of employees or users to specific sets of modules within Zoho. This is a really good idea, not only for security purposes, but also to make sure that the users have as limited a screen as they possibly can to do the work that they need. Adding capabilities and features that they either cannot or should not use doesn't help them. It merely makes it more difficult for them to get at and find and work with the information that they need. We also looked at web tabs over here. Web tabs are a great way to access a website from within your Zoho CRM. It's a way to put a page from an intranet or from a page from a useful website into your CRM so that it's easy for you to find that information without having to tab out of your CRM or without going to a different window or a different tab in that. So let's take another look at the module that we created in the last class, the one called MF Tech Assets. Here's my list of modules, and you may remember that any module that has an asterisk beside it is one that we have created. Oh, Tech Library Items, that's where that is. All right, we reordered that. Normally it would be in the bottom of that list of modules, but when we organized our modules, which is what we can do here, we moved it. I'm going to move it back down to the bottom. There. So that should be, did that go to the bottom? No, it didn't. Okay. Like any list, it has trouble reaching the very bottom, so I'll just put it there. Okay. And then I can move equipments above it, and that should put, yeah, that should put it back in the bottom. And then I'll save that list. So that's a quick refresher on organizing modules. And now, of course, in our drop-down list under the ellipsis, that's in the Zoho control bar, under that we have it at the very bottom. So this listing here in the modules tab of the modules and fields customization setup screen, this listing here replicates the listing that we have up here in our Zoho control bar. All right. When we hover over this field, the ellipsis means that it's a custom module. It's shared with one profile, that is the administrator, and it was last modified on January 29th at 10:52 in the morning. Now there's ellipsis beside the field name. The ellipsis says, hey, there's something to see here. In the case of our module, we can see these options. Actually, let me skip through this and set up a screen here for you. There we go. All right. There's that screen. So let me go here. There we go. All right. So these are the module options that we have to work with. We can change the layout of the module. Either we can modify a layout or add a new one. We can rename the module. We can look at a list of fields, and we can set module permissions. A bit farther down, we have the more esoteric options. We can map dependency fields. We make it possible for one pick list to affect another pick list or a multi-pick list. I'm not sure that we'll get into that in today's class. We also are able to set validation rules, and we can delete the profile entirely. Let's go back to here. Sorry, where you can delete the module entirely. Deleting a module is not something that we recommend unless you know how to undelete it, which is something that we cover in another advanced class. Let me know if this is functionality that you require, and I'll see about either demonstrating that later in today's class, or just be in touch and we'll work out how to, we'll help you with that specifically in a one-on-one context. The first thing, let's go here. And I'm going to start with a new layout that I've created, test layout 1. Once again, within the layouts screen, I have options. I can control the layouts, set layout rules, validation rules, look at a list of fields, create and modify links and buttons, and see a summary of my work here. If you've done a modest amount of work in a relational database management system, such as Access or MySQL or FileMaker, most of these functions will be they'll be very familiar to you. For example, the fields list, that's an excellent way to look at all the fields that are being used in your database or in your CRM or in this particular module. Looking at field permissions, again, all of these things are should be familiar to you from your work in relational database management systems if you're lucky enough to have that experience. All right. So let me go to my test layout. And it may be helpful for a moment to think about the rationale behind this module, why I've created this particular module. This way, that actually, in terms of your own work, in terms of creating your own modules, you probably have a rationale for creating a module. It's useful to think about that in advance of actually getting your hands dirty, unless, of course, you're just learning you're creating a module for the sake of learning how to create modules, which is a great idea. But if you're talking about solving a specific problem, it helps to think carefully and plan out what the problem is and exactly how your module is going to address it. So that instead of thinking about abstractions, you can deal with concrete realities. Now I've created this module to identify equipment that my organization uses in serving our clients and to handle the concept of renting the equipment either internally or externally in the process of completing project work. This way, just in terms of understanding the specifics of my business, handling the business details, it's helpful to know what equipment is actually being used in your organization. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to simplify the field name for the name of the asset. All right. MF Tech Library Item. That's a complicated name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the properties of that field. Tech item name. Now, Zoho gives me a warning. It says that all changes made here, except marking the field as required, will reflect in all layouts. That's helpful to know. So when I make changes, certain changes that I make in one layout will propagate to other layouts as well. And what it says here is actually all the changes I make here, other than making the field required or not, will be reflected in all layouts. That means that a field may be required in one layout, but not be required in another layout. I'm going to leave the tech item name as that, and I'm going to change the number of characters allowed to 80, and I'll add a tooltip. There are two different types of tooltips. I can have an info icon, where actually we'll show you what that looks like. Give your tech item a descriptive name here. Usually this will, actually I think there's a comma after usually, this will include the manufacturer and the model. Now, if it's an info icon, it looks one way. If it's static text, it looks a different way. And I'll show you the relationship between those right now. So the info icon, I've got a wonderful button here, a wonderful option here that Zoho gives me that lets me preview what this tooltip will look like. So the tooltip will give you an eye for an extra information tip, and this is commonly understood to mean click on this for information about this thing. So when I click on that, Zoho will pop up this tooltip, the one that I just wrote. I can put a lengthy description in here. I can have up to 128 characters, which is pretty good for a tooltip. However, static text is a different option, and Zoho is about to express its displeasure with me. Whoops. Now my maximum length is 32 characters, and I've exceeded that, and Zoho tells me that by showing me a red outline here. Let's see. Maybe if I delete that second sentence. Nope, that's still too long. Maybe remove the word here. Nope. And actually when I hover, Zoho tells me that I'm currently using 39 characters and I'm allowed 32. Actually, you know what? How about this? Use a descriptive name here. Now Zoho tells me, oh, I'm within the 32 character limit because it no longer has a red outline around the field. Now when I preview this, Zoho shows me that it sits in this area, that will be my field title, and then in slightly gray text, use a descriptive name here. Whether you want to use a info icon or static text is up to you. If you are using a more complicated form and your users may not be as familiar with the form, you might actually want to start with the info icon and then perhaps at a later time go to the static text. Of course, static text people will see every time that they create a new record in this module. If it's the info icon, they may not bother to click on the info icon and then get confused about what they should be doing in the field or exceed the field limits, or it's a trade-off between simplicity and likelihood of something being used, or I should say simplicity and completeness. On the simple side, we use static text, but that limits you to 32 characters. On the other side of the equation, you have 4 times as many characters. You have 128 characters for your tooltip, but because it's hiding behind an info icon that the user has to either hover over or click on, it's less likely that the user is going to employ that tooltip or pay attention to that tooltip. I'm going to leave this as static text because that's how I've set it for the time being. Now, before I click on done, one of my tricks, one of my guiding principles in technology work is before I click on the done button, before I commit a change, I ask myself, what do I expect to see? what should I be seeing after I've clicked this button? What do I think is going to happen? Now, what should happen is I'm changing the field label for what was MF Tech Library Item. I'm changing it to Tech Item Name. So down here, that should change. And now there should be a static text tooltip in there. Let's click on that. Actually, the tooltip won't show up until I view or preview the form. There we go, tech item name. That has changed. I can do the same for the tech library item owner. I'll click on, it's not letting me click on that. Let's see if I can figure out what's going on there. Okay, I may have to get in there and look at that. What if I change that? Whoops, let's stay on that page. Let me save my changes. And I still can't change that. So every item, every object needs to have an owner. All right. So because it has to have an owner, I can't change that. I wonder if I can change the name. Rename. Oh, that's the layout. Let me go here and see if I can change the name of my module. See if that will change the name of that field. Let's take out the word library. As we noted yesterday, a module name will have a plural form as well as a singular form. Let's go back to here and edit that. Let me look at my test layout. Yeah, tech item owner. Good. All right. So we've done that. So we've modified the name of the module, and we've seen how modifying the module name changes some of the fields that are automatically populated. I can also override this. Some of these I can override. So I can change that. And after I've changed that label, I save my changes. So let's see, we've done that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this section if I can. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't want to let me delete it. Okay. Let me delete. Huh. Oh, I see. Yeah. Interesting there. I was hoping to delete this section, and I'd like to draw your attention to something here. If I have a required field in a section, this is a section that I've got here. I'll deal with that in greater detail in a moment. Here we have the module demo area. This is a section of my module, and I had a required field in here. The serial code was a required field, and when I had that set, I wasn't able to delete it. If, on the other hand, I say I uncheck the mark as required, now I can delete that field, and because there's nothing that is required in this section, I can delete the whole section. All right, so let's create a new section. I'm going to leave the default. These are all default fields. Some of them are movable, some of them are not. Obviously, the tech item owner, every object has to have an owner. Let's see, let me look at my notes here. All right. Let's do a user lookup. Well, actually, let's create a new section. A section is just a distinct part of your module, or a distinct part of your form or your layout. It's helpful to use that in terms of grouping information. It's useful to show you this is a section of related information. I can move things around. Actually, when I drag any of these objects onto the screen, it creates it. This is very much like any drag and drop environment. I know that the Weebly platform does this. I think WordPress, the WordPress web, the WordPress blogging system also uses a similar sort of drag and drop creation system. So let's say this is our new section, testing fields here. And then Zoho tells me that I'm invited, it invites me to drag and drop my fields here. I can also drag and drop my fields elsewhere. And let me grab a user. There we go. So when I drag a field over from this area here, our new fields area, when I drag a field over into a section, it shows me a few possible places where I can go. This is a new section, so it'll be either at the top left or the top right. I can also move that field into an existing section and place it where I want to put it. Now, I can't put a field outside of a section. I can't put a new field anywhere outside of a section. Zoho gets very upset about that. I try to drop it, say here, and no luck. So Zoho insists that a field be in a section. I'm going to put a user field right there. So I'm going to set that as who's using this. All right. This may be different from the tech asset owner. For example, I may have a staff of people who are working with different clients on different jobs, and this will become a drop-down menu of all users. In fact, no, I'm not going to say that quite yet. So I will set my parameter. I won't mark it as required, and the permission. Actually, let's mark this as required and do something fun here. So I'm going to set that as required, and I'm going to edit the properties and leave that as a single user. It is set as required, and let's leave that. Let's not do a tooltip there. So we'll just leave that exactly as it is. So somebody always has to be noted as using the item. Now let's do a single pick list for the type of asset. All right, so when we create this, actually let's put the asset down here in the tech item information, and let's put it underneath the tech item name, or put it above the tech item name. Let's make this one, again, a mandatory field. So when I put an item into this list of technology assets, Zoho is going to insist, or this module is going to insist, that every asset have a type of asset. So let's call this asset type. And here's my pick list. We looked at pick lists briefly in a previous lesson. This is a handy sort of way to make sure that your users are only entering information within a certain list of parameters. So I could say that the asset could be a CPU, it could be a storage system, I can create a new asset by clicking on the plus sign, or a new item in my pick list. It could be a peripheral. It could be display hardware. I can add items. If I say that peripheral is too general a term, I'll delete that, and I'll add one that says keyboard / mouse. I can select a default value in this pick list. So if I typically have more displays than anything else, or more CPUs than anything else, or if there's one value that is likely to occur more often than others, I can specify that one. I can expand the pick list so that it takes up more room, or I can simply allow that to scroll. Adding bulk options is a really cool function as well. It's extremely clever. So let's say predefined choices. Predefined choices allow me to specify pick lists that Zoho already has built in. For example, if I'm dealing with a location, or days of the week, or months of the year, so I can add, for example, states, and automatically it will fill in all of those choices. If you've already got this information somewhere, you can use it as well, or you can use Zoho's list, Zoho's built-in lists. I do strongly recommend, very strongly, that if you are dealing with, in most cases, that you think, well, in all cases, you should think very carefully about the pick lists that you're using. For example, if you are saying the origin, let's say, where was this tech asset item acquired? Let's say we're looking at that. You might be tempted just to use the standard pick list, the US states pick list, set it as a required field, and that's all there is to it. The problem is, what if you happen to be traveling and you're in Tokyo and you go to the Akihabara district of Tokyo and you pick up a really cool thingamabob? Or maybe you're in Singapore and you go to Simlim and you pick up some terrific hard drives at a bargain price. So depending on where you go, you may actually pick up tech assets that don't fall neatly in your pick list categories anymore. And unless you have the ability to go in and change your pick list, you're going to be very frustrated about this, and you're going to wind up possibly including incorrect or invalid information, because your pick list may not actually give you the ability to modify the values anymore. So if you're a user in a system, you may find yourself, or you may strand your users if you don't create your pick lists very carefully. When you create a pick list, make sure that you have something like an other category. That way your users will always be able to enter information that perhaps you didn't expect. All right. History tracking. This lets an administrator review the changes that have been made to this field by different people. It's like a change history, and it's a really cool function. I've set this field to be required. This is a handy feature right up here: display values alphabetically instead of the order entered. Now, I can change the order of these manually. So I can say that storage hard systems should be down there, and keyboard should be between display and hardware. So let's see, CPU, display hardware, keyboard, storage, other. I like this. In some ways, I like this more than alphabetical order. Alphabetical order makes sense in a lot of cases, and you may actually want to set alphabetical order or change that. It depends. If your pick list is absolutely static and you never have an other option or a not applicable option, let's put that in there as well. Not applicable. The reason you might want to avoid a alphabetical order is if you have something like an other or a not applicable value in a pick list, your users do not expect other to be in the midst of a pick list. To give you another example, when we were talking about states, let's say the origin, the location of purchase, if we had that as a list of states, your users would not expect to find other immediately after Oregon. They would expect it to be either at the top of the list or at the bottom of the list. This is just a user interface convention. All right. I'm going to leave the alphabetical order. By the way, I should point out that here I've done an alphabetical order except the two other values, other and not applicable. Adding options is in bulk. That's one last thing I'm going to mention. I can do a manual entry there where I can either type entries there, or I can enter them. I can type, copy and paste a list into that. I'm going to cancel that for the time being. I'm going to click done on this list. I think I'm finished with that for the time being. All right. Let's see here. Let's add a number field here. And I'll skip ahead to the properties of this field. Encrypt fields is an interesting option. Some fields offer encryption. This feature is limited to certain modules, and perhaps more importantly, it's only available in the Enterprise edition of Zoho. The free, standard, and Enterprise versions of Zoho, the free, standard, and professional versions of Zoho do not seem to offer encryption. This is particularly useful when you're storing legally sensitive information. Credit card numbers are pretty high on the list. Anything that's personally identifying could also be regarded as sensitive. If you have an employee, if you have a list of employees and the list of employees includes their social security numbers, I'm not sure you should be storing those in the first place, but if you are storing their social security numbers, that would be a really good thing to encrypt. However, Zoho does offer a limited number. Let's see. Oh, you can't see the pop-up window. Let me see if I can make that pop-up window available to you. Window capture. Let's grab that window and let's call that. There we go. Okay, there. So when I clicked on that question mark beside encrypted fields, my web browser popped up this window. And Zoho tells me that it uses AES encryption. It notes here that free, standard, and professional versions do not offer encryption, and that only the Enterprise edition offers encryption, and it only allows me to encrypt 5 fields per module. Zoho also points out that custom modules allow encryption, but other than those, only leads, accounts, contacts, deals, and linking modules and users. Only those types of modules, or those modules, offer data encryption. I suspect the reason for this is that data encryption tends to be processor intensive, both to encrypt and decrypt the fields. Okay, I'm going to put that away for now. I'm going to get rid of that window. There we go, and we're back. Um, Now back to required fields for a second. When you're designing a module, you'll probably be tempted to make lots and lots of fields required. There are some perfectly good reasons for this. Um, Most of them are psychological. You've designed your module, and you want users to use it a lot, and you want users to use all the great functions and fields that you've provided in your module. But the truth is that um, when you require data, when you require fields to be completed, that decreases the odds that people will use the module or that people will choose to use it. It decreases customer happiness when you have lots of required fields. People will typically enter the information that they need to get their jobs done and aren't too happy about entering additional data unless they can genuinely see the motivation for doing so. You want your users to be entering information because it's useful to them rather than because you think it's necessary. So just be judicious in your use of required fields. Let's see, I'm going to get out of there. And what I'm going to do right now is actually for that number, actually I'm going to remove that field because I don't need that field right now. Let's see what have I got. Next up, date and time. There we go. Let's have a date field here. When acquired, or I can double click on that, acquisition date. Set the properties of that. I'm going to say that that is a required. That is required. I'll leave the tooltip for now. I'm going to have a second date. And why is it not letting me do another date? There we go. There's another date field. Date deployed. Actually, date deployed and date retired. These are handy functions to offer to users. It depends, of course, on the nature of your business, whether you want to do that. This way, I can track for any particular object, for any particular asset. I can track when I began using it and when I stopped using it. This also can be handy in terms of depreciation. If you're dealing with the accounting side of your business, you'll realize that Zoho can employ depreciation on your behalf. Before I go on to creating the next section of my new module, I have to mention that Zoho offers different numbers of available fields for custom module development. Over here on the left, at the bottom of this dark gray area, you can see that I have 303 custom fields left. When I click on this, I get a table that tells me the limits of how many fields of different types I have used and how many are still available. I'm sorry. It tells me the maximum number of any type of object, and it tells me how many more I can still create. So for example, single line fields, pick lists, multi-select pick lists, email, phone, multi-line URLs, and auto number. I'm allowed to have a maximum of 130 of those, and specifically, I have a multi-line maximum limit of 25 fields and auto number maximum limit of 1. And of all of those, I still have available 127. This is a top-of-the-line Zoho instance. These numbers are as high as Zoho lets us go. It actually doesn't tell me how many I've used. If you want to know how many you've used, you actually have to use your subtraction skills, which is okay. There's a small, helpful, almost wonderful workaround to these limits. I will show you those in just a moment. Let's, for the time being, let me click out of that and go to a currency field. I'm going to put the currency field down in here. Take item name, asset type, let's put that there. Item cost. We're going to ignore decimal places for now. You may find it useful, but I can set how many digits are allowed in this number and what my how many digits are allowed. Of course, if we're talking about the cost of an item, I don't know about you, but I don't buy too many things that have a item cost that are over 6 digits. If you need more than 6 digits for your item cost, let me know, and I'll see if we can help you out by changing the maximum number of digits allowed. Zoho allows me to round, which is nifty. I can either round up, I can round down, so when a user types a fractional value, I can have it rounded up, rounded down. I can have now rounding off simply means that Zoho will truncate the number, or we can leave it normal. Pop-up help right there shows me what actually happens when under different options if I'm using decimal places. This is a really cool function, and by all means, most of the time in Zoho, if you're just getting started, do hover over those question marks or click on the info icons. If I decide that I don't like the work that I've done on creating this thus far, I'll say don't save the field, and it will just eliminate the field that I was attempting to create. I'm going to put it back right now. I'm going to put it back there. I'm going to say that the decimal places is still 0. Change the number of digits allowed to 6. Set item cost. And say that that is a required field. Uh-oh, got a lot of required fields here. My users aren't going to be very happy with me. The percentage field, there we go. The percentage field may be useful to you. I don't know if we'll have time to look into that today. Long integer field allows us to create long integers. These are fields, these can be, let me go here and look at properties. Our long integer can be up to 18 digits long. Nifty. I'm not sure what you're going to use that for. By all means, if you use this and you're in the live chat right now, let me know what you use a long integer for. Interestingly, I'm able to set a requirement on the field that it not offer duplicate values. So I'll hover over the information there, and Zoho tells me that it helps to eliminate the creation of a duplicate record. Now, Zoho also warns me that a module can have a maximum of 2 unique fields. That is, 2 fields that are set as not allowing duplicate values. Obviously, this could be useful in terms of a serial number. Although if this is an integer, it would have to be purely a numeric value. All right. I want to look at something here. I think in the single line there. If you're using serial numbers, or if you're entering serial numbers and you realize that your serial number actually is an alphanumeric string, as many of them are these days, rather than a purely numeric expression. You can have a single line with a certain number of characters, let's say an 80 character. That's a heck of a long serial number. Let's say a 40 character, and we can set again duplicate values there. So that would be a way to do a serial code rather than a strict serial number that is purely numeric. All right, auto numbering is helpful. Auto numbering is really good in terms of, where's my auto number? Let's see. There it is. Auto numbering is useful in terms of setting something. For example, we can set a starting number of 1000, 1001. And let's say, I wonder if I can do, so for example, I could have a string starting at 1001, and then a starting number would be, sorry, a string with a prefix series A, starting number 1001, and then after that, every time I create a new record in this module or a new object in this module, it will go from 1001 to 1002 to 1003 and so on. I'm not going to save that field for the time being. There is some overlap between the auto number field and the formula field. Let me throw a formula field in there. There is some amazing power here. But I should point out that Zoho does not apply calculations or formulas to existing records. That's the warning up here at the top. When we complete a record that has a calculation field in it, then the calculation will be carried out. The calculation will not go back through all your existing records and do its thing. There are amazing options here. You can have a formula that does both simple and complex things for you. I might create a field called, for example, depreciated value, and then use a formula to calculate the current value of an asset based on a 5-year depreciation table. If I click on a function, Zoho down here in the yellow section below these three pick lists, it gives me a tip for the usage of the function. If I double click on a function, Zoho puts it down here into the expression field, and it simply puts the insertion point at the end here. If I want to put the long integer inside the absolute value, I actually have to, let me go back. There's the absolute value. I can click down here, move my cursor to the left, and what happens if I click long integer? There it is. My long integer is now within the absolute value. So just remember that when you add when you click on something, Zoho will assume that the insertion point is at the end of the expression. Let's see. If you've used FileMaker Pro to create a database or a table within a database, this will be familiar territory to you. Let's say, so we have a great deal of functions. The functions are organized into numeric functions. To number is interesting because that will actually cast a string into a numeric expression. You have your string functions, length. We can find these are familiar. These should be familiar to you in terms of spreadsheet work as well. Spreadsheets will often have, if not all of these functions, you'll have a lot of overlap between the functions here. Remember toNumber? Well, toString changes a numeric value into a string value. Lower and upper changes the case of something. And substring, actually substring is useful insofar as substring is analogous to your left, right, and mid spreadsheet functions. So substring is just a different way of looking at it. Substring is how you slice and dice your strings, where it's essentially the mid function. It's analogous to the mid function in a spreadsheet, or in a in a spreadsheet, where you give it the source string, the start point, and the end point. And interestingly enough, or usefully perhaps, what you notice here is if you take the string A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you extract the substring starting at character 4, that's inclusive, and numbering begins at 1. For Zoho functions, you can see that numbering begins at 1 instead of 0. This is either wonderful or horrible depending on what you're accustomed to. I've encountered both all over the place in any number of applications, and I'm not even sure which one I prefer at this point. I just like it. I just need to remember which one I'm in at any given time. So the substring functions are really cool in terms of slicing and dicing your strings that you've entered elsewhere in your spreadsheet, in your Zoho module. All right. And then here, let's see. So these are the functions. The functions can be carried out on these fields. The fields are grouped by the section in the module, which is really helpful actually. And finally, you have your operators. So you've got your mathematical operators, and then you've got your Booleans, your Boolean operators, and your comparatives. Okay, very powerful stuff. Very, very powerful stuff. One of the handy things that Zoho offers you down here is it will check the syntax of your expression. So if your expression is good, Zoho will tell you that there are no errors. If you've made a mistake, Zoho will tell you about it. Let's see what happens if I put a brace on that. I know that that's not my that's not my field name. Let's see what happens. Yep. We couldn't find one of the CRM fields in your link. So Zoho tries to give you the most accurate error messages it can when you check the syntax. Really powerful stuff here. Let me get out of here. I'm not going to save this field. Actually, one more thing about the formulas. It is possible to type a formula directly in here. ABS minus 5. It is possible to type an expression directly into that area. Whether or not you do that is a question of how comfortable you are with it. You have to be super careful, obviously, especially with your parentheses. One of the nice things is that Zoho doesn't actually care about carriage returns. Zoho doesn't care about carriage returns or spaces. It completely ignores them, which means that when you're writing your formula, you can spread it out over multiple lines just to keep things straight, which is something that I like to do. If you're having trouble with formulas, drop us a line, send us a chat message, and we will see if we can give you a hand. I'm going to create a pick list, a multi-line pick list. Oopsie, I'm going to put that right there. Let me edit the properties there. This should be getting familiar to you. We move a field type over into our module area here, one of the sections, and then we click on properties to edit it. There's a multi-line value. That's handy in terms of creating either short text fields, 2,000 characters. Usually we divide the number of characters by 5 to approach the number of words, at least in English. This works very well. So if you're looking for a field that has about 400 words in it, that would be a small multi-line list. This would be about a 6,000, maybe a 7,000 word, it would be about a 6,000 word field right here. But Zoho warns us that we cannot use this field to create custom views, reports, or other filters. If you want to get technical about it, I'm not certain, I suspect that on the back end, Zoho is storing our multi-line fields, our large multi-line fields, as a blob, or essentially as a blob, a binary large object. All right, let's see. A multi-select pick list. A multi-select pick list is exactly like a pick list, except you can choose more than one of something. Let's say skills required. Your multi-pick list option could be maybe operating systems is a skill to have. Digital audio might be a useful skill to have. How about digital video and compression formats. So we may have multiple, let's say, depending on the job that we're doing, we may require more than one or more of these of something. In that case, use a multi-line pick list. Okay. Lookup fields. Lookup fields are not particularly, the lookup field is not a particularly, let's see. Right. Where am I here? Sorry, the lookup field. Yeah. Now this module that I'm creating is not actually going to be a useful module to use. It's all over the place. I'm just using it to demonstrate aspects of Zoho. So if you're looking at this thinking, how is this going to work? It probably won't. That's okay. We're demonstrating how to create, how to use these fields in detail. Let's create a lookup field here. The lookup field is, this is like, a lookup field in Zoho is like a lookup in a spreadsheet or a relational database. It grabs information from somewhere else in Zoho. Used for, so let's say this is an asset. I'm going to use it for an account. Okay. So the field label is used for. So this way, I can say this will look up a list of people. This will look up a list of accounts. I'm going to add a file upload. Looking up a file upload. Again, here are my properties. I can have an upload of up to 5 different files. So this could be supporting documentation, where we might add contracts, rental agreements, manuals. Maybe I want to describe what we're going to do with this asset. That would be the multi-line field, or I can upload a file. Zoho has a warning here, a little letter I in that field, or in that description there, and it tells me that the total file size is limited to 20 megabytes. That is per record in this module. So you obviously won't be able to upload a large number of larger documents. So we're going to click cancel there. Checkbox. let's say, let's do a checkbox as well. Actually, let's change that to reference docs, or I'll say, yeah, no, let's say project docs. By the way, Zoho has a project management system that ties in with the CRM. Very powerful stuff. Let us know if you're interested in that, and we'll see about helping you with it. We'll say whether it's essential to project. There's a question mark there. And I'll just leave that exactly as it is with a checkbox. And of course, we can add a website. Where is my website? I'll upload URL right there. Asset vendor site. So let's say, or let's say vendor support site might be a useful thing. That would probably make sense to go down here in the asset definition area. So I'll put that there. All right. You can set a limit here. Let's click on permission properties. You can set a limit of up to 255 characters. If you really need that length, go ahead and use 255 characters. If you find it's not long enough, you may want to use a URL shortening service. On the other hand, if you need more than 255 characters in the URL, you're probably doing some really interesting things in terms of adding data to the URL call. Okay, let me cancel that. All right. Lower left corner, the number of our remaining fields to use. We are not in any danger of running out of custom fields, but if our module were much bigger, we might be in trouble. So here's our answer, subforms, right here. A subform is like a form within a form. It's a module within a module. Let's scroll up here. Now remember this number here, 294 custom fields left. Let me create a subform up at the top, and we'll call this participants. Participant info. I can add fields to this area. Remember this number, 294. I'm going to go into a lookup. I'm going to add a lookup field. Remember that number, 294? See what happened to that. Lookup. There we go. Okay. Oopsie, I have to click on. Sorry. When I'm in, that's actually. Oh, let's go back to here. When I'm in a subform, I can't drag and drop these fields in. I have to click on Add Field within the subform. So I can do a lookup, and I can say who, and I can say lookup in leads. Actually, let's say lookup in contacts. You'll notice that I now have a lookup here. I have a lookup field, and my custom fields left is still at 294. Let's add another field, email address. Add properties, we'll say it's a required field. Click done. So what we can do here is I've now created 2 extra fields, but my custom fields left is 294. When you find that you're running out of fields, if you're running out of fields, create a subform and put fields into that. Each subform also has a limit. Let me see if I can bring that up. There we go. All right, let me make that full screen. All right, so you can see here that there are limits, field limits. Off in the right column here, we can see enterprise, The enterprise version of Zoho has a limits of, let's see, 3 user fields per module. Oh, sorry. Come back. There we go. All right. These are the limits for individual field types. The free version of Zoho does not allow you to do any customization. You can't modify the existing fields or create new modules. The standard version gives you these limits. File uploads are there as well. Formulas, let's see where we have. Right. So here we have the different modules. An image field is only available in the enterprise version. Same with multi-select lookup fields. So obviously, the more expensive, the more you're spending on your Zoho, the more features you get. In terms of subforms, you can add 8 custom fields per subform from the list of available of 100 fields. So these are your limits. These are your limits for different types of subform fields. So you can have a maximum of now this is not in what I've actually just done, but you can have strings, numbers. Those are digits without decimals, so it's an integer. You can only have 10 multi-lines. You can't have any auto numbers within a subform. So there are limits to subforms, but in terms of stretching your Zoho, instance so that you get a little bit more functionality out of it, if you run out of your custom fields, you can add additional fields by using a subform. All right. I'm going to save this module. Let's see what happens. Okay. I'm going to set the permission on the layout, make sure I'm the only person who can use it, so that none of my users on this in Zoho, none of my fellow users can necessarily see this until I'm ready to experiment with it. And here, there's a quick preview. This is what it will look like. If I've selected different users may be able to see different versions of this. And marketing users have no permissions on it at all, so they won't see it. And I think that may be a bug. There we go. All right. So there's the image field. There's my participant information. There are my testing fields that I've created. There's a checkbox. The preview actually is semi-live. It doesn't actually enter data, or it doesn't save the data, but it allows you to enter the data. There's my pick list. There's my list. Here's my list of possible owners. These are users within Zoho. I can search this. Zoho gives you an amazing amount of functionality. There's an amazing amount of ability that Zoho gives you, even though we did very little hardcore technical work. Zoho has made it very easy for a product to look very refined here. All right, I'm going to escape the preview and I'm going to go back to home. There's my home screen. Scroll all the way to the bottom of that. There's my tech items module that I've just created. And here we go. I can either import items into this module, or I can create a new one. The reason this gives me this window is because no records have been created in this module thus far. And now here we go. Have you noticed that there are very few fields here? A whole bunch of fields aren't here. Where's my subform? Where's my test area? The answer is that standard layout is the default. I put those new fields into the test layout, and there they are. This is an excellent way to confuse yourself by not realizing that you put fields into one layout that is not necessarily the default that shows up. And the first time you do this, you're going to panic, and then hopefully you'll realize before you panic too much exactly what has happened. All right. So there we have the start of a custom module. Zoho acts very much like a full-on relational database management system in that it has a bunch of tables already linked to each other. Actually, it's easier to use than a relational database management system in some respects because it has already linked these tables to each other. The use of custom modules and fields allows us to extend Zoho's functionality. We didn't get very deeply into the idea of database relationships, of linked fields or linked lists. There are entire groups of university courses based on that. And we've had about 76 minutes to introduce some of these ideas. I've been messing with databases for almost 4 decades. I absolutely love them. But it becomes increasingly possible as you work on these things to make an absolute mess of your data if you're not careful. With great power comes also great possibility for horrible accidents. So make sure, I do recommend that you make sure that you've signed up for Zoho's backup services so that you get into the habit of backing up your data before you start using scripts, before you start using complex calculations, complex layouts. You may be in a position where you have to restore your data or back up your data before you engage in large-scale changes so that if something goes horribly awry, you can always return to a backup state. Or establish a second Zoho account where you can experiment with these things in safety. There's a very fine line between pushing the envelope and tearing it apart. You should trust your instincts to hold back from trying to turn your CRM into a full-fledged ERP. And if you're not sure of how to do that, or if you're not sure whether you're getting close to that edge and you're worried about it, or even if you have a little nag, do drop us a message, a chat message, or an email, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. And I believe that is where we finish our class today. Let's go here. Let's go there. There we go. If you have any questions about what we've covered today, well, let's do a quick recap of it. We looked at available field types. We looked at some of the limitations of custom fields in terms of limitations on them and limitations of the number of custom fields that we can have. We added out-of-the-box fields and custom fields to a layout. We did a lot of work on modifying field properties, and we took a short look at subforms. At this point, do you have any questions about what you've seen today? If you do, please email us at support@marksgrouplive.com. I'm also going to be live for a few more minutes, and I'm monitoring my chat window, which is over on that screen there. If you do have any questions, I'll be hanging around for about 5 minutes right now to see if any questions come in either via email or via the chat. And if you do have questions, please submit them. Otherwise, go to our website, look for the chat option in the bottom right corner of every window or every screen on our website at marksgrouplive.com. I'll be back in about 5 minutes to see if there are any questions and take up the Q&A section of this course. Otherwise, I hope to see you again in another lesson. Let's go here. Let's go here. That is it for today. I do want to thank you for joining us. I don't see any questions that have come in on the chat or via email, so I'm going to assume that if you have questions, I've answered them. And if you do have other questions, please do drop us a line at support@marksgrouplive.com or go onto the website. You'll see a live chat option on every screen. If you'd like to leave right now, please be sure to check out the calendar section of the marksgrouplive.com website to see upcoming trainings that we'll be going over. If you have any suggestions for other classes or how to adjust this topic to make it more useful for you, please email us at support@marksgrouplive.com, and we will answer that way. And that being said, I do thank you for attending. I hope this was helpful for you, and we'll see you next time.